viewers, you're watching Afghanistan Report and I'm your host Swati Kundra. The main stories are: Obama says won't reduce US troops in Afghanistan until 2017. NATO and EU leaders met in Warsaw to discuss future role in Afghanistan. Afghan President Ghani calls for peace on Eid al-Fitr. Citing a string of attacks from the Taliban, US President Barack Obama says he plans to leave over 8,000 American troops in Afghanistan until the end of his term. We have a report.
Expressing concern over the security situation in Afghanistan, President Obama said on July 6 he will keep US troop levels there at 8,400 through the end of his administration rather than reducing them to 5,500 by year's end as previously planned. The role of US forces in Afghanistan would remain unchanged, he added. It includes training and advising Afghan police and troops and supporting counter-terrorism missions against the Taliban and other groups. Obama's presidency ends in January.
Nevertheless, the security situation in Afghanistan remains precarious. Even as they improve, Afghan security forces are still not as strong as they need to be. With our help, they're still working to improve critical capabilities such as intelligence, logistics, aviation, and command and control. At the same time, the Taliban remains a threat. They've gained ground in some cases. They've continued attacks and suicide bombings, including in Kabul. Because the Taliban deliberately target innocent civilians, more Afghan men, women, and children are dying. And often overlooked in the global refugee crisis. Millions of Afghans have fled their homes, and many have been fleeing their country. Now, as President and Commander-in-Chief, I've made it clear that I will not allow Afghanistan to be used as safe haven for terrorists to attack our nation again.
Obama, who took office in 2009, pledging to wind down the US wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, said he had ended America's combat mission in Afghanistan.
I'm announcing an additional adjustment to our posture. Instead of going down to 5,500 troops by the end of this year, the United States will maintain approximately 8,400 troops in Afghanistan into next year through the end of my administration. The narrow missions assigned to our forces will not change. They remain focused on supporting Afghan forces and going after terrorists. But maintaining our forces at this specific level, based on our assessment of the security conditions and the strength of Afghan forces, will allow us to continue to provide tailored support to help Afghan forces continue to improve. My decision today also sends a message to the Taliban and all those who have opposed Afghanistan's progress. You have now been waging war against the Afghan people for many years. You've been unable to prevail. Afghan security forces continue to grow stronger, and the commitment of the international community, including the United States, to Afghanistan and its people will endure. I will say it again. The only way to end this conflict and to achieve a full drawdown of foreign forces from Afghanistan is through a lasting political settlement between the Afghan government and the Taliban. That's the only way. And that is why the United States will continue to strongly support an Afghan-led reconciliation process and why we call on all countries in the region to end safe havens for militants and terrorists.
To speak more on this, we are now joined by Major General retired Dipankar Banerjee. Mr. Banerjee, what compels the United States not to reduce the number of troops from Afghanistan as announced earlier?
There is a real danger now that if Americans withdraw all their forces, the Afghanistan National Army, which is at best about 3,20,000 odd soldiers, are not quite capable of carrying out the war against Taliban.
Do you believe that the Taliban is gaining strength because of support from Pakistan?
Yes, of course. It has been Pakistan's strategy all throughout that when America withdraws and when America is defeated in Afghanistan, Pakistan will occupy Afghanistan. it cannot, of course, directly be seen to be occupying Afghanistan. So, through its proxy, that is the Taliban, the leaders are in Pakistan. They're being kept there, trained, looked after. They will then go into Afghanistan and take over Afghanistan on behalf of Pakistan. That is the Pakistan military's strategy in Afghanistan. And so, in one sense, Obama keeping some troops behind after he leaves office is also an attempt to see that the Taliban cannot immediately gain control. And it will now be up to the next president of the USA to take a fresh look at Afghanistan and decide on Afghanistan policy for the USA.
Thank you, Mr. Banerjee, for sharing your views. To discuss the future course of action in Afghanistan, the NATO and European Union leaders held a meeting in Warsaw, Poland. The meeting was significant as growing Taliban stronghold in Afghanistan raises security threat in the war-torn country. We have a report.
Leaders from NATO member countries and European Union arrived in Warsaw for a two-day summit to decide the future role in Afghanistan and discuss other issues. The meeting was attended by Afghan delegation led by President Ashraf Ghani. British Prime Minister David Cameron emphasized his country would remain committed to European defence after it leaves the bloc.
Our defence spending accounts for a quarter of the European total. Here at the NATO conference we'll be talking about the extra things that we're going to be doing, working with our European partners to guarantee strong defence of Europe, standing up to Russia, making sure that we work together to tackle the terrorism to our south, making sure that we continue to work with the Afghan government and the Afghan security forces to help keep terrorists out of that country. Britain is not going to be playing a lesser role in the world. We will make sure that we use our strength, including through NATO, to spread British values and the things that we believe in.
NATO allies have promised the United States they will stump up around $1 billion a year over the next 3 years to help fund the Afghan military.
One of the great achievements of this meeting is that we now have in place the $1 billion non-US commitments, or almost in place all the commitments we need.
In all, 39 NATO nations and partners contribute to the overall force of about 13,000 in Afghanistan. However, they are concerned about growing security threats in the country as Taliban forces now hold more territory than at any time since the 2001 US-led invasion. The Islamic State group has also established a small presence in the war-torn country.
Moving on, Afghan President Ashraf Ghani wished citizens on Eid al-Fitr and called for peace in the war-ravaged nation. Here's a report.
Afghan President Ashraf Ghani battled for peace in the war-torn country as the nation's Muslims celebrated Eid al-Fitr, a festival that marks the end of the fasting month of Ramadan.
عید سعید فطر به شما ملت بزرگوار افغانستان و به همه برادران و خواهران مسلمانمان در سطح جهان مبارکباد میگویم. ما به عنوان یک دولت و ملت مسئول و صلحجو همیشه آرزوی صلح را داشتیم و تمام تلاش خود را برای پایان دادن به جنگ و خشونت‌ها در کشور خالصانه انجام دادیم و هنوز هم از طرف ما دروازه برای آنانی که می‌خواهند از کنترل بیگانگان خارج شده و به زندگی صلح‌آمیز برگردند باز است.
The Taliban scored a series of military successes last year after the withdrawal of most international combat forces and now controls more territory than at any time since 2001. But the fighting has come at a heavy cost, with 11,000 civilian casualties last year alone. Peace talks broke down last year after it was revealed that Akhtar Mansoor had covered up the death of the Taliban's founder Mullah Muhammad Omar 2 years earlier. Efforts to revive them in a framework backed by Pakistan, the United States, and China have so far failed. Ghani's sentiments were echoed by locals whose lives have been severely affected by years of war.
همدارنګه د اختر اوله ورځ ده نو غواړو چې خوشحاله اوسو په همدې اختر اوله ورځ کې خوشحاله اوسو او همدارنګه د نورو خوشحالیو دپاره نو دولت باید مکلف دی چې زموږ دپاره سوله راولي
دولت هم خوشحاله
او امنیت راولي ولې چې موږ هیڅ وخت په هیڅ ځای کې ځان په امنیت کې نه دی احساس کړی
ما آرزو داریم در کشور ما صلح امنیت باشه ما دولت تقاضا داریم که صلح امنیت در وطن ما صلح امنیت در وطن ما برقرار بسازه و یعنی ما از جنگ دیگه خسته شدیم به صلح و آرامی ضرورت داریم.
Devout Muslims around the world observe intense prayers during Ramadan and fast every day from dawn to dusk for the entire month. Eid al-Fitr marks the end of the holy month. After offering prayers, Muslims visit their friends and families and exchange gifts and cards. They wear their finest clothes for what is their first daylight meal in a month.
With that, we come to the end of this week's episode of Afghanistan Report. I'm Swati Kundra taking your leave. We'll be back next week with more news and views from Afghanistan. Goodbye and Khuda Hafiz.